PhillyStartupLeaders.org presents the 2010 Founder Factory Conference, recorded November 17, 2010 at the World Cafe Live in Philadelphia. Brought to you by Morgan Lewis, providing comprehensive transactional, litigation, labor and employment, and intellectual property legal services to clients of all sizes, from global Fortune 100 companies to just-conceived startups across all major industries. On the web at morganlewis.com. And by Chariot Solutions, an IT consulting firm specializing in application development and systems integration using Java and open source technologies. On the web at chariotsolutions.com. And by Cone Partners, an independent insurance brokerage that delivers integrated solutions to meet client needs in business, benefits, life, and personal insurance. Also by Monetate, the leading independent provider of testing, targeting, and personalization for websites. On the web at monetate.com. And by Leadnomics, an industry leader in lead generation and performance marketing. On the web at leadnomics.com. In this program, opening remarks from Amy Larimore, the CEO of Empire Builders Group, and Tracy Wilson-Rossman, Director of Sales and Marketing for Chariot Solutions. And we'll hear a keynote address from Farid Naib, founder and CEO of DDC.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Founder Factory. How's everybody doing? All right, we did give you coffee, so I expect far better than that. Good morning. Welcome to Factory 10. How's everybody doing? All right. For you Twitters, by the way, there seems to be a division in collateral. It's either hash Factory 10 or hash Founder 10. So we could see who wants to take which side. So for those of you out on Twitter, please tweet us. So good morning. My name is Amy Larimore. I'm the CEO of the Empire Builders Group. I'm also the District Vice President of SCORE. We are the Counselors to America's Small Business. I'm also the Chair of the Founder Factory Committee this year. We are so excited to see everybody out here today. We are a third-year sold-out crowd. Woohoo! So with that being said, we're ready to kick off the proceedings.
Good morning. For those of you who don't remember me, I'm Tracy Wilson-Rossman. I'm Director of Sales and Marketing from Chariot Solutions, proud sponsor, and also the outgoing Chair for Founder Factory and a Philly Startup Leader Board member. As Amy said, we're in our third year. I cannot believe that this is our third sellout. I think that really says a lot about our community. We have over 200 investors, entrepreneurs, students, and supporters of our community in attendance today. The format of entrepreneurs speaking to entrepreneurs and the idea of connecting with so many like-minded people continues to strike a nerve. The conversations are substantive, the energy is galvanizing, the talk's informative and inspirational.
All right, this year we have themed the conference around the idea of cradle to tombstone. Because we all know in the startup world, when you get that idea, when you're in that place of the idea, that's where the juice is. And when you're in the place of the big, big sellout, and our goal is all to be big sellouts here, right? That is also where the place of the juice is. So today we want to talk to you about all the pieces that fall in between. So what we've brought to you is the industry's experts to tell you about everything from idea to pivot point to keep on keeping on, because sometimes it matters to just persevere through the dip to a very successful exit. We've also brought you the baddest entrepreneurs that we could find to talk about business problems that relate to each of us in this space. Our goal for you today is to leave to make sure that you have something else to kill for your dinner tonight. All right, so I'd like to thank, before we go any further, the volunteers and the committee members that made all of this possible. You will have the opportunity to meet each of the committee members. They are your introducers tonight. And their names are up here on the slide, so let's give them all a round of applause for making this possible. And let's give all the volunteers who aren't specifically named in the committee, who did everything from fold things to run around to help us, let's give them a round of applause because they make it possible as well. Thank you to each one of you for what you've contributed to making today what it is.
And of course, we can't run this without our sponsors, so we'd like to thank Morgan Lewis, who is our lead sponsor, Chariot Solutions, wonder how they got here, Cohen Partners, Leadonomics, and Monetate. They're the ones that are helping keep our prices low so that we can let everybody in our community attend. And now I'd like to introduce Steve Goodman, a man who's been a great friend and mentor to the startup community.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm supposed to talk about the regional ecosystem and the fact that we have the third straight sellout for Founders Factory, and that PSL continues to grow, and I'm going to talk about some of the other initiatives which I'm sure you know about. When you put them together, it almost seems like a cosmic convergence, which seems so ironic because the times are tough and funding is tough, but yet I know anecdotally that I've never seen, and my group at Morgan Lewis has never seen, quite as many good, solid, fundable business plans from early stage companies. From serial entrepreneurs to Wharton Venture Initiation Program residents to just people who've come to town because they've heard great things about the entrepreneurial community and sort of the percolation that is going on to support entrepreneurship in this region. So in the last, if I talked to you even 3 years ago, I couldn't talk with as much confidence about what I've called the cosmic convergence in the level of nurturance for entrepreneurship in this region. I mean, if you've been to any of the Philly Startup Leaders events, including the Founders Factory, which is an affiliate of Philly Startup Leaders, you see how that is burgeoned. And you see when 200 or 300 people attend those events, there's a lot of interest, energy, dynamism. And then you go to a Mobile Monday event, and you have another 200 or 300 people hearing about mobile technologies, and including many, many entrepreneurs. And then you have Dream Adventures and Good Company Ventures, boot camps, where the entire community of Philadelphia, professionally, venture capitalists, serial entrepreneurs, surround entrepreneurs, because I think it's an old saying that a rising tide lifts all boats. More success stories in this region will breed success. And so things like today's event and Fishbowl and the educational aspect of the program, as well as what it's going to do for the entrepreneurs who are presenting here. Again, it's all part of the evolution of the ecosystem. Suffice to say that Morgan Lewis could not be more proud to be the feature sponsor again this year. Our devotion to helping create entrepreneurial success stories, I think, is pretty well known, and I will not gild that lily. Suffice to say also that if there's any entrepreneur in the audience who's finding it difficult to get support from either the professional community, from mentors, from venture capitalists, from investment bankers, or from just people who help polish business plans. There is the wonderful thing about this ecosystem to me is that that community really will surround any entrepreneur and maximize their potential for success. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jameson Detweiler, president of PSL, and also someone who I've worked with over these last few years on his own entrepreneurial venture. And all I can say is he is a star, and he's someone who is resourceful, resilient, deliberative, and we have great fondness and confidence in Jameson. both in his role as president of PSL and as someone who's going to be a star on the entrepreneurial horizon in this region for times to come. Jameson?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Steve, for that very kind introduction. Thank you for all the support that you and Morgan Lewis have provided to PSL. You guys have been obviously one of our biggest supporters over the years. So let me just tell you briefly a little bit about PSL. PSL has been around for a little over 3 years. We came together, this was before I was involved, but actually we came together to create a support system for early stage startups in the Philadelphia region because there really wasn't one. And it's amazing to be here at the third Founder Factory and my third Founder Factory and see how far we've come and really to see how far the region's come. So let me tell you a little bit about the PSL leadership. These are all the great people who are sort of the second generation of Philly Startup Leaders leadership. Hopefully you'll be able to meet a lot of them today. Definitely look for them throughout the crowd. They'll have PSL on their name tag. And we've been privileged to take over from a really great group of people who founded and ran this organization for a very long time and who are still very, very actively involved. And it's been a privilege to work with them and to get to know them over the last few years and to work with them formally for about the last year. And I can say that I am struggling to try and keep up and help to lead this new team and do as good a job as the previous team did. So the next thing that I'm going to do here is something that's become sort of a tradition. As a group, Philly Startup Leaders has a manifesto that kind of expresses what it is that we do and what it is that we stand for. And so at every one of our large gatherings, we read it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So our manifesto says, because startup entrepreneurs need each other, starting a company can be a long and lonely journey. Each milestone is a small miracle, from idea to prototype, from first employee to first customer, from first revenues to first profits, and eventually to a thriving, successful business. Most startups fail along the way. To survive this journey, startup entrepreneurs need many things. They need access to funding and talent. They need support from their government and their community. They need opportunities to educate themselves and their team. But more than anything else, startup entrepreneurs need each other. No one can truly understand the life of an entrepreneur but another entrepreneur, no matter how much time they might spend investing, teaching, consulting, servicing, or legislating in the world of startups. Philly Startup Leaders is a community of startup entrepreneurs dedicated to helping each other on their entrepreneurial journeys. We provide the kind of emotional and practical support that can only come from a fellow entrepreneur. Emotionally, we share wisdom, inspiration, and friendship. Practically, we share advice, connections, and resources. We mentor each other and coach new entrepreneurs who are making the transition. We often collaborate and connect with the larger ecosystem, with people and organizations who are not themselves entrepreneurial. But what makes us so different and so effective is our focus on connecting entrepreneurs with each other. We thrive because we understand that, above all else, startup entrepreneurs need each other. So that's our manifesto, and I think it expresses very well what it is that we do. We are here to support each other and to encourage people and to try and create a better community for starting businesses in Philadelphia. So now that I've wrapped all that up, I'm going to introduce our first speaker and our keynote speaker for the day, and I'm really excited to hear this myself. For our first speaker, we were looking for an idea generator, not someone who creates ideas, because most of us do that, but someone who can generate ideas and then bring them to life. Someone who can turn an idea into a product or service that people want or need. Someone who can reinvent ideas to keep them fresh when market needs and the environment change. And someone who's had success with idea generation and business building in many different funding environments. We think you'll enjoy hearing from Farid Naib. He's been a successful entrepreneur since the age of 17. His successes run a wide range of industries, whether selling stage lighting in the entertainment industry, developing and licensing complex financial trading software systems to banks around the world, offering software platforms for document management, and even investing in the next big consumer beverage. There's one common theme. He knows a good idea. He knows how to turn an idea into a real business with real buyers. He knows how and when to adapt ideas to sustainable, scalable, long-term businesses. We hope you enjoy our first speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, the founder and CEO of DDC. Please give a warm welcome to Farid.
Good morning there. Let's see if I can get myself set up here. It's kind of funny to be back on a stage like this. One of the first companies I ever started, I didn't sell stage lighting. I actually did stage lighting for bands. So I spent a lot of time on, stages usually a little bit larger than this, with my lighting gear and doing stuff for bands. But I'll talk about all that. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Let's see. Okay, so let me get started here. The topic assigned to me was Ideation, which I still can't say, but I agreed to do a little speech on it. And the kind of title that we're working with right now is An Entrepreneur Shares Real Life Experiences Going Through. Now, this was the secondary title. After when we first started and thinking about it, that's really the title that we came up with, was kind of, what was I thinking about when I started that company. And I will guarantee you, anyone that's had a company and run it has run into this phase of growth, et cetera, where you're like, why am I doing it? And it's so difficult, but you get through it. And we'll go through there. So let's talk about the definition of ideation starting. So excuse me, I need to time myself too, since I only have 45 minutes. 1 second, I will get that done. Stopwatch, there we go. So ideation, a verb to bring into existence or cause to be produced a concept or concept that serve as a foundation on which to develop the entrepreneurial effort. And I got to tell you, I've never really used this word before, and I don't think I'm going to use it a lot. It's not really, how a lot of entrepreneurs talk, because we're usually too busy and have too many things we're trying to do. And being an entrepreneur, as again, many of you know, it's like having a term paper due every day. There's stuff that you need to get done that you didn't get done. There's always kind of a balancing things. So you tend to be fairly direct in pretty much everything you tend to do. But the topic is idea. So let's go through. I'm going to give you a little bit of my history just to kind of show you the things that I've done and talk about the ideas that came there. And they're pretty varied, if you will. And I'll just talk about each of these for a moment. So the first business I ever had, and I was really, really young, 14, 15, is I cut grass. So, what was my idea at that point? Well, I guess, grass grow, and this is regular grass, just for those who might be, the other one might have been vastly more lucrative, but I didn't have the wherewithal at 13 to sort that out. So, anyway, I cut grass around the neighborhood. I'd go there, my parents had a mower. I guess my idea was grass grows and I could make some money by cutting it. So I went out and cut grass, and that was a pretty good business, I guess, at 13. The second business, I grew up, I'm, an old guy at this point. So I grew up and started going to concerts in the 70s, I guess. And I would go and I would wait in line, and back then you would go out and spend all night waiting in line for concert tickets. You'd get there at 7 p.m. and they'd go on sale the next day at 10 a.m. and there'd be pretty much a party in the line. And I was pretty young. I have no idea what my parents were thinking. I certainly would let my kids do it. But as I would wait in line and go buy those tickets, I realized that those tickets were fairly valuable, and I could buy up to 10 tickets at a time. So when I was waiting in line, I started buying 10 tickets and selling the rest. And basically, I sold them to my teachers at school, which was, I guess an okay business, except when you went to the concert and you were right next to your teachers who, were in seats next to you. But that was a pretty good good business. I saw, a lot of good bands, saw Led Zeppelin this here and there, and it kind of dovetails into my next business. I don't have any real musical ability, though I, always have. Had musicians as friends. My third business, I had some friends that were in a little high school rock band, and they were doing shows here and there. And I was actually about 14 when I started working with them. And I knew a little bit about electricity. I built a little light board and lighting console, and I started lighting them. And a lot of they never paid me, so I started saying, okay, you got to pay me. Then a lot of other bands started saying, well, can you do it for us? We need some lighting. And that ended up becoming a fairly, big business at a pretty early age. Atlanta, I grew up in Atlanta. At the time was a hotbed of music. The Allman Brothers had broken up, but there was a lot of bands that were playing around, like the Allman Brothers. The Police came in. They were booked through a booking agency in Macon, Georgia. So I did their first tour. The Sex Pistols came down and played. There was, countless bands, B.B. King, Chic, Kansas. I'll talk a little bit about some of those. B-52s, I think I did their first show. R.E.M., I did one of their first shows. So, it was kind of a fun business. I remember the first really big contract we had, the sound company came and asked us to do a Willie Nelson tour. I was about 17 years old. And, I didn't have really a lighting rig to do Willie Nelson, and they fronted us a bunch of money, and I built a lighting rig. And we went out on that tour, and about midway through, Willie Nelson got arrested, and the tour was over. So that was part of one of my first, for Grass as well. We can tie it back to my first company. So that was really one of my first businesses, and I learned a lot there. And that was one you kind of just fell into. I wanted to be involved, and you'd create this thing, and suddenly other people want it. And that was probably one of the purest, less studied businesses I ever got into. The fourth business I did was right after grad school. I sold the lighting company in about 1981. I'd finished college up at the same time. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and I thought I might go out and get an MBA. I applied to Wharton because people told me it was a good school. I really didn't know it was part of the University of Pennsylvania when I applied. It took a while to figure that out. But I got in and, really had a really good education there, enjoyed it, and I was very friendly with one of my professors there who was kind of an eccentric fellow, but brilliant. And he did the first model to price American-style options. So I did what we called advanced study project back then, a thesis, and saw, did some things for Merrill Lynch, saw what they were doing, and had the idea that, hey, I could put this option model into a system to kind of manage their trading. And so we did that. We kind of built this thing and started selling it to the various banks. No one would buy it at first, and we had, this was before there were laptop computers. It was probably 83, 84. And we couldn't just run our software on any computer because we needed something called a math coprocessor, an 82, 87, which most computers didn't have. So I bought a road case from the company that used to make my road cases when I did rock and roll stuff, and we would go to all these banks, and I was seeing all my newly minted Wharton MBA classmates, and I was having to go find the service elevator with this big black box. So it was a pretty interesting thing. And I know this is a theme later on, but it's also certainly one of my themes. Most businesses don't work like you think they're going to work. So here we thought we were going to be doing over-the-counter foreign currency options to start off with. That never worked with that particular company, but we ended up with a bank called Drexel, which is no longer with us, but Drexel was doing a currency operation on the floor of the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, and they came and hired us to build pricing sheets for that, and we kind of built a business out of that. We ended up doing most of the volume on the Philly Stock Exchange for currency options, and PhilX was the primary exchange for currency options at that point in history. And we also ended up doing a lot of corporate treasury. We put in treasury systems at Dow, McDonald's, Unisys, et cetera. So that was one thing where you start off with one idea and your business turns out to be totally different, and that'll be a recurring theme, and I'll go through that on a couple of these things. So I ran that business. Orlin and I started that in '85. Orlin left to pursue other interests in 1990. I didn't really get along with the guy who sold the shares to. So that company kind of split apart in 1992, and I started up FNX. And FNX was a pure startup. I thought I should go back into the banking world a little bit more deeply, and that was the whole, my whole thought behind that was, well, banks have a lot of money, so I should probably sell to banks. Same reason people rob banks, I guess. But I started that business, and I didn't know how many employees I would have, and I kind of have a math background, so I gave the company my initials plus X for a variable number, and because it sounded high-techy to have X on the end of anything back then, so. F&X was kind of what we did, and we ended up becoming kind of the go-to company for global foreign currency options. We sold UBS, Credit Suisse, a bunch of different banks around the world. It quickly became a global company with offices in Singapore and here and there. and it was just kind of a great ride. And I started that company in '92. By about 1998, I think we were about 22, 23 million in revenue, and I sold half of it. I let all my employees sell their shares so they could have a liquidity event. And I sold a bit, you know, made some coin. Was pretty happy with that. But then the company I sold it to kind of ran it into the ground. 1999 came in. Everyone was worried about Y2K, so the markets fell apart. Which now I'm kind of proud that I saw I sold it at the perfect time. But back then I was as confused as everyone. So anyway, the markets really fell apart in '99. The company kind of stopped growing. They panicked. They created an entirely new business, as it were, which selling exchange stuff for all these internet exchanges that were popping up. They never got any volume. Most of my management team at that point, the senior guys left, and they actually started up a company called Gain Capital, which is just filed for its IPO. I see the Morgan Lewis guys nodding their head because they're, of course, doing the work, and they've done a fine job for that company. I was on the board for 7 years. But, of course, that company has done, they'll be in the certainly the hundreds of millions, and I've been very fortunate to be involved. And I think it shows the owners didn't do a very good job because, these guys, my management team back then had great talent. All my management teams have talent, and they were able to successfully start a company, which was a good thing. And actually, I'll tell just a little story about that company since I have a minute. So I was a Wharton MBA, '84 grad, and I had this guy come in called Mark Gallant, who's probably one of the most entrepreneurial guys I know. And he was a Harvard grad from 1984 as well, a Harvard MBA grad. So I was able for 5 or 6 years, Mark worked for me, to go around and say, hey, go to Harvard. You can come work for a Wharton grad then. And that was really funny until he went off and started what may be $1 billion company. So he could go, and then go to Harvard and start a $1 billion company. So he's winning right now, but it's a long race, and we're still pretty good friends. And that's a good kind of maybe a little segue there. As you do this entrepreneurial stuff, I think if you do it right, you end up connected in a pretty strong community. Working at a startup is really hard work, but it's really good work. It's really interesting. Most of the people there are very capable, or they don't live in the startup very long. Mark and I, he was a client at Credit Suisse. He was the first guy on my board. He then worked for me for 5 years. I was then the first investor in his new company. I was on his board for 7 years. We're now trustees of each other's estates. We do a lot of stuff for each other. And this is a friendship I developed solely through my business. And I have a lot of those. I have Joe sitting down in the first row. Joe and I worked together for years. We do work now. So in any case, it was a good business. But I sold it in 1998, and my management team left. And the company crashed and burned and started declining. And I ended up buying it back in 2002, because I couldn't stand to see the employees go away or the clients really not dealt with well. And one of the funny stories there, I built a beach house in the Hamptons with some of the money I got from the first time. So I sold my beach house to Howard Stern. So I was probably the only company that was financed in part by Howard Stern's acquisition of my beach house. So, and he was a lovely guy. Still is a lovely guy. But so I bought the company, and then and kind of this whole idea thing. The company's business had changed. We were selling large licenses to banks around the world, and no one wanted to buy large licenses. They didn't really want to take a chance from smaller firms, and I had to find some new ways to grow revenue. So we were kind of stuck then, and I started hearing about ASPs, which are now software as a service, and people will tell you there's a difference between ASP and software as a service, multi-tenant versus single-tenant. I don't really believe it. It's just it was called hosted, then it was called ASP, and now it's called software as a service. As the technology gets better, that business model works a little bit better as well. But so we ended up starting in about 2002 to go into the ASP world, and that business is still a very strong business. When I sold that business, SunGard owns it, and the ASP part is still growing very strongly. We also went into something called managed services, where we kind of didn't really care that much about selling the software, but we would sell a bunch of people to go run the software to big banks, and we'd get paid millions of dollars to have our own people on there. So again, it was that kind of idea of recreation. Most companies can't have the same idea going forward. You have to do different things. And I've got another good example of that. There's a local company called EP Henry, which does hardscaping. You probably have seen some of their stuff. you know, you guys have gardens or whatever. It's a 100-year-old company, and J.C. Henry, who owns it, is a great guy, and he came up with the idea of, hey, let's make our bricks look like stone. You know, so he would go out, and they now sell pavers and all that, and for 3 years he had 100% plus growth on a 100-year-old company. So it shows kind of the power of ideas and kind of transforming the enterprise, as it were. There's quite a lot of things you can do there. But anyway, so going on with FNX, so I came back in, I changed the business model a bit to sell more what our clients wanted. And then in 2007, I sold it to a publicly traded French company called GL Trade, became the only American in the French management team, which is a whole another set of stories. But and stayed there for 2 years, which was kind of what I agreed to do. And then they got bought by SunGard. And I started my 7th business, which I'm currently running, and that's DDC. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, so we'll come back into that. But the whole 7 businesses thing is a total lie. I've had many, many more businesses. I've had a tanker tracking software. So I did this software project for this firm called Mallory Jones and Lynch. I tracked oil tankers around the world. I had a business for a while where I did M&A spreadsheets for Citibank and other things to manage debt. I've been a consultant to IBM. I've had a lot of different businesses, and almost all of them haven't worked. So I haven't made very much off them, but the ones that do work kind of make up for that. I've also served as operational head for a couple other firms, a firm here, Align, that does global risk compliance, and FX Bridge, that does retail FX options. So there's a lot of things to do there, and there's a lot of investments. And that kind of brings me to a lot of ideas, rather, brings me to my next slide. So Thomas Edison, one of my kind of personal heroes in terms of a great American entrepreneur, et cetera. And his quote is, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. And that's a very, if you run a company, that's a really valid quote. I mean, not every company is going to succeed, but you're going to learn a lot of stuff anytime, it doesn't work. And, things may not work the first time, but you do take that learning. And I'm going to give you a concrete example of that. If we go back to my history, you kind of see the 3rd business, Spectrum Lights, where I'm doing, all this stuff with rock bands around the world. And then I go and I'm doing stuff for large banks. I'm selling derivative software and fixed income trading. What could I possibly learn from working with rock and roll bands that would help me in derivative software? But I will give you this example, and I will tell you this is why FNX became successful and why I was able to sell it for coin. It was directly related to that business. So in Spectrum Lights, I had 2 lighting rigs, and I had this one weekend. And we were booked, one rig was booked for a band called Sea Level, which was an Allman Brothers spinoff, and the other rig was booked for a B.B. King show. And I got this call from another band that was really big at the time. The band was called Kansas. They were, your typical big late 70s band. And they asked me to light a show for them in Atlanta. And this was a really big opportunity for me. This was like, another level up. I had been doing 4,000 to 5,000 seat auditoriums. This would be more like a 30,000 seat auditorium. It was just a great, great opportunity. So I, started putting together, I said yes. I started putting together a rig. I borrowed some lights. I rented some stuff. I found some people that would work that weekend for me, and went out to do all 3 shows. And it was a total disaster at Kansas. They needed a lot of lights. We put so many lights on the lighting truss that the truss bent. The dimmer board never showed up for the Allman Brothers show, so they just plugged in the lights and left them on. One of the crew members didn't show up for the B.B. King. It was an utter disaster and the longest weekend of my life. So fast forward, and FNX is, in a heyday and doing very, very well. We'd signed up Credit Suisse for a global FX option client, Deutsche Bank for global FX option client, UBS for global option client, and we were working pretty flat out. We had people, around the world trying to get these systems in. And I get a call from Citibank. Citibank's like, we want to buy global FX options. You're the guys, come in and we went there and we started talking to them. We could charge them whatever. But they needed to start right away. And it was Citibank, which is a great name. It was a multi-million-dollar contract. But I said no. I said, if we try and do this, because these systems were very labor-intensive to put in, we're going to fail. We're going to fail across the board on everything. So rather than risking that and getting locking up Citibank, we just said no. And they went away. They actually came back 6 months later, but there was no certainty they would. We did have competitors. But because we did that, we were able to get successfully complete all our installations, get a reputation for providing good service, and kind of move on from that point. So without that experience in the music business company, I would have never made that decision at FNX. I mean, I actually told my sales guy, and Mark Gallant had come on and was kind of leading sales at this point, not to sell for 6 months while we got through our backlog. And it was an interesting time, but the right decision. So, and sometimes I just had to push this up there. When I was doing derivative strategy, some things get dug up. So someone on derivative strategy, this was a financial trade thing, found out about this and did a little article. So, you never kind of know what will come back to haunt you. But it's also good to, behave well and ethically in all your businesses. So it's no worse than this. So I think, there's so many ideas, so many companies, so little time. It might be good to spend a moment in thinking about why do you become an entrepreneur? And I've given talks on being an entrepreneur quite a few times, and I find that there's three major reasons that people tell me when I ask them. The first is because you have a good idea, or you have an idea that people want to buy. And this is a really, really pure form of being an entrepreneur. Not too many people have, that one idea and only one idea that people are going to want. But if you have it, it's just great. It's a great thing. And probably, Steve Jobs originally was like that, probably the HP guys, et cetera. So there's, kind of the idea entrepreneurs and then the just serial entrepreneurs in a way. Because he would like wealth. I get this a lot, I see people tell me, all the people that are rich had started their own businesses, et cetera, et cetera. This is the world's worst reason to start a company. If you really want to get money, go work for an investment bank. They still pay pretty well, even after all the type of stuff. Much surer on the risk-reward stuff. I know a lot of entrepreneurs that haven't made it. Actually, being an entrepreneur is a little bit like being a musician. I have two good friends who are good musicians. One's a guy named Warren Haynes, who plays, the Allman Brothers, Government Mule, all these bands. The other guy's Tinsy Ellis. He plays in a blues thing. They're both really good, but it didn't work out for Tinsy quite as well, so he's doing these little shows and driving vans, hundreds of thousands of miles, usually him driving it. So, that was a bad way to get wealth. Being an entrepreneur is a bad way if that's your goal. It's just not a good thing. So it's really, are you kidding? Just a bad idea. The next one is because you want to work for yourself. You like the challenge of working for yourself. You like having to solve different problems every day. When I got out of grad school, I kind of, wanted to solve different problems. So I became a consultant, which I learned you don't really solve different problems. You go out and, to maybe solve one, but a lot of times the problem's been solved. You just need to justify it. So, wanting to work for yourself is a great reason to start a company. It's just, of course. And of course, for my thing, I've spent very little of my life working for other people. So it's, I'm basically unemployable by anyone else, as it were. Just to go, the topic is ideas. So to go into some of the other ideas, companies I'm involved with in one way or the other, and just talk about the sheer breadth of things there are. There's Gain Capital, which I talked about. They filed for their IPO. They're doing great. So the idea there was people might want to trade currency options, as it were, or foreign currency on a retail basis, even if they're not a bank. And that idea worked. They have clients in 100 countries, and they're doing very well. Align GRC is a global risk compliance. What that means is they try and help companies achieve their goals without taking too much risk. This one fellow had a real interest in that. He wrote a bunch of papers and thought that companies should do it. He's really, passionate about it. He would be an idea entrepreneur, and this company's kind of off to the races. They've grown very well in the last year. FX Bridge does software for retail FX options, so I'll just kind of skip that. The next one's kind of interesting. Vita Coco. That's coconut water. If you guys go in delis, you might see the little square Vita Coco things. These guys that started it, thought coconut water was really, really healthy, and people, they wanted to be in beverage. They looked around, but they thought this was a really good thing to do. It would be great for athletes, et cetera. And they started the company up, and they started, for them, and every business is a little bit different to start, but first they created some product, they tested it, they got a few places to sell it, and kind of went on from there. And that company is doing very, very well. I'm an investor there. I think Madonna's an investor too, so it's kind of fun to invest in a company that she's invested in. Hint is doing well. The Hint is flavored water. You'll see them over at Starbucks and different places, and they've done, quite well as well. And the idea there was, people like, if you go around and you see like lemons in water and you pour it in the water, it tastes vaguely like lemons or whatever, people like that infused water. And if they could figure out a way to pasteurize it and sell it, they would do very well. And they figured it out. They have a very heavy plastic bottle, and they heat this water up in the bottle to kill off anything that's there, and it tastes quite good. And I'm in these two beverage companies because a good friend of mine started up, was one of the original investors in Glaceau, Vita Water, which got sold to Coca-Cola for $8 billion. But I remember when he was driving around to delis, getting to delis to carry it in a way. So it's, the beverage thing seemed to be pretty good. And then a couple of just ideas, this one guy hated sticking his hand into garbage disposal, so he created this little thing called the Alligator that goes in and gets stuff out of garbage disposals. This other person uses their iPad for everything, wanted a keyboard for it, so they started up Solid Line, which has keypads for the, keyboards for the iPad. It's a nice little leather case. They're selling them at some of the Hammer, whatever those company's name is, in New York. So there's all sorts of businesses to start. So you should feel that there are a million ideas out there, and all you got to do is figure out how to actually do the idea. DDC, to talk about it real quick in terms of an idea, as it were. So when I sold FNX, they asked me to find all these documents. It's called due diligence whenever you sell it. I know we're doing an exit story, so someone will probably talk about that. But they were asking me, where's your tax returns from Thailand? Where's your employment agreements? Actually, Joe was working with me at the point, so he remembers. And there were so many documents, and I'd had them all at one point. They'd come across my desk or my CFO's desk or someone's desk, but we just couldn't find them. They were in someone's email folder. Maybe they weren't with the company anymore. They were in a filing cabinet and an office in Singapore, and we'd moved twice. They were just lost. And I ended up with what's called a reps and warrants escrow. I had to warrant that all these papers actually existed or we were in good standing. And it was a pretty large reps and warrants escrow. It was, I think $3.5 million. And it really annoyed me because that reps and warrants escrow was because this paper that came to me, I didn't put somewhere secure that I could find. And so I started thinking about this issue, and there's some solutions out there. There's like Box.net, et cetera, but they're kind of, big boxes in the sky. There's no organization. So you can throw, if I threw 10,000 documents in there, there's no telling I could actually find which of the 10,000 documents I wanted. So we created this thing that's got a little bit more structure. You can put documents in by type, by structuring documents, option grants, employee contracts, contracts with customers. And I'll show you a screen or two from that. But that solved that problem for me, and now I'm solving it for other people. I also had a problem with boards. I was on a board of quite a few companies. I got off one board, and for the next 2 years, I got all the board materials because someone went to the old email list and just copied that and sent out all the board stuff. Pretty common problem in terms of management boards. I had trouble. I could never remember what I'd sent to my board or when the board meeting was. And on the flip side, being a board member, I could never remember what company talked about what, and I had these massive email folders for every company that I was on the board of. So I needed better organization there. I also was an investor in a couple different funds, and they would send K-1s, the tax statement. And I never knew when I had all my K-1s, which was also really annoying, because you have to send them all to your accountant. So I created, a system really to deal with these problems. I needed a smart filing cabinet where I could put stuff in, but would also know what it was, would email me if a contract was maturing, would give me a graphical representation of had all my K-1s, et cetera. So I created that and just, kind of real simple. So this is where I put all documents for an equity financing. There's tons of different documents up there. This is like a form I fill out, and there's a different form per type document. So that's proved to be a pretty powerful concept. So the idea there was the smart filing cabinet with what we call a frame that kind of gives you access to, the ability to store information about, these documents. And it all comes together in kind of this little snapshot. You can see this is for one company. I've got board information, budget, capital, equity financing. It's great for me. I can go there, drill down, get anything I need for any company that I'm involved with. And it was just, just kind of one of those ideas I had, a problem I had. I was pretty sure other people had it, and the company's kind of off to the races and doing fairly well. So there are a lot of ideas out there. So how do you actually go out and do it? Well, first have passion and courage. I don't think you can run a company if you're not extremely passionate about the idea, and also, and I mean really excited. You get excited talking about it, and also courage. I mean, starting a company is a really difficult thing to do. Starting a company up now in a bad market, a bad economy is totally different. Not having to say salary is really difficult. So you need a lot of courage to do it. You also need to plan. I mean, it's great to have an idea, but once an idea, no one will buy a great idea in a way. They will buy something built on a great idea, but the idea by itself is not all that, not worth all that much. It used to be worth things maybe in 1988, 1999 at dot-com boom, but now you actually have to have something. So you got to put a plan together. You need a plan both to show people that you're serious about what you're doing, that you've thought it out, and and for yourself to kind of marshal your own thinking. You need to build something that someone wants. And this is really tricky because you may be passionate and have courage that someone really wants your pet rock. That's your new concept. And everyone may tell you you're crazy. No one's going to buy a pet rock. And I don't know if you remember, pet rock were fads quite a few years ago. Not an obvious idea. Probably coconut water is not an obvious idea either. But, they're doing very well. And I think they're, well, I can't say what the market cap is, but everyone's very pleased. Having said that, you have to roll with the punches. Things change. Nothing works out according to plan. You've got to be adaptable and adjust as things don't work out. And this kind of goes up against the next one, and that's what the great thing about being an entrepreneur. It's all this balancing act. You also have to stand by your convictions. Sometimes it's not working because it's just going to take a little bit longer to work, or you just need to do a little tweak. So, not only do you have to be kind of adaptable, but you have to stand by your convictions. And at the last point, you also have to consider that you might be wrong, either about the company or about your direction or whatever there is. So this is a lot of really conflicting things, and that's really what being an entrepreneur is all about, just kind of going out there and doing what you need to do. But the number one thing about being an entrepreneur, number one thing about trying to take a company and moving forward is, you just have to go out and do it. If you've got an idea, just start working on it, start bringing it to fruition, and, it's not going to start on its own. Just a couple things here in terms of the starting a business. I always like to do this. I talk at Wharton quite a bit, and I always give this speech there. People have this kind of esoteric view of being an entrepreneur. It's all great, and those of you who have done it know what work it is. But there's physical issues. I like to tell the story of the FNX when I started that. One of the first things I had to do at FNX, I had all these people working for me. They'd taken a chance. They were coming on. I wasn't well funded or anything. And that we move into this office, and there are no trash cans. So I remember getting in my car and going to Kmart and buying the trash cans. Then we put trash cans there. And I didn't know if we had I think the building, we moved in a little bit early, and the janitorial services weren't starting till our rent started. We moved in 2 weeks early. So I couldn't really ask these guys I just hired to, empty the trash. So I would go out and, empty the waste paper baskets late at night pretty much every day until the rent started. So these are kind of things you end up doing as an entrepreneur. Another good story is the guy that owns Tommy Guns, who started that, and I think they serve Tommy Guns barbecue here. It's a barbecue restaurant in Manioc. Great guy. And he once came and did one of these Wharton things with me. And he was talking about starting the barbecue restaurant and how he had a smoker that would smoke the barbecue meat. And after about 2 or 3 weeks, he realized it had to be cleaned. And he didn't have anyone he could ask to do that. And so he ended up kind of stripping down, putting on shorts and climbing inside the smoker and cleaning out all the lard and all that type of stuff that had collected. So he kind of wins at the physical thing. But, if you're a CEO of a startup, you end up having to do pretty much everything. And those are a couple examples. A lot of people always come to me with partnership issues too. I'm starting it with my 2 good friends or my 3 good friends or whatever. Having been involved in tons of those businesses, get a partnership agreement there in place that defines what everyone's doing, what everyone owns, what happens in a disagreement, all those things. Because I don't care how good the company is, you will end up in a disagreement at one point or the other, and people's expectations will change and diverge. I get asked a lot about what do you pay yourself, particularly from the Wharton students, which I always find kind of an incredible question. as you know, it's great to pay yourself in a way, but everything you pay yourself takes away from the business. So, you know, as little as you need is probably the right answer, or as much as you can afford, somewhere in between there. But, you know, for DD, you know, I mean, you don't make very much working for a startup. You're not in it for the salary. What about job security? There is none in startup. You know, big client leaves, you don't get funding. Any one of these things will kind of blow up the company. So there is no job security. So it's a hard road to go. The importance of first revenue is really, really important as well. You know, getting someone to buy what you're selling is kind of a huge thing in a way. That kind of proves that there is a market out there. So whenever I look at a company, I'm much more enthusiastic about a company that has gotten someone to buy something. Even if, you know, the numbers are way off, you know, if they've got at least one customer that's not their, you know, brother or whatever, one customer using their product and happy, then I'm much more, you know, eager about the company. And I get asked a lot about fundraising, and I'll just briefly go into that. There are three real sources of fundraising. There's your own pocket, you know, your parents, which is classic. There's these things called angel investors. I think there's a talk about them a bit later, but angel investors tend to be people kind of like me that have money, like entrepreneurial companies, a lot of ex-entrepreneurs that may put money into different things. There's you know, a level, you know, between angel investors and venture capitalists. These Ben Franklin Technology Partners, there's a few of these organizations, you know, DreamIt does some work, et cetera, that can also help you get started. And then finally, there is venture capitalists, which are, you know, tend to be where you go out and get your really big money. And there are a lot of really good quality venture capitalists in this region. We sell to venture capitalists, so most of them are out on the West Coast, but a lot of deals get done here. This is probably the second largest region after the California, as it were. And I wanted to talk a little bit about VCs for a second. I help a lot of entrepreneurs when they get into, you know, selling the company or whatever, and I do a lot of, you know, I'm a finance guy. I got a finance degree from Wharton. I spent years doing, you know, structured derivatives, et cetera, so I can kind of analyze it. And I find that a lot of entrepreneurs do not understand the terms of what they are signing when they sign a VCs. So I'm kind of out of time to go in too much detail, but in essence, there's something called a liquidation preference, which means they get their money out first. The real difference, though, is whether it's participating or non-participating. If it's non-participating, they get their money out first, and then you get some money, and then everyone splits everything after you've caught up. If it's participating, they get their money out first, and then you split everything going up. And this can have a profound difference on how much money you as the entrepreneur get. And I'll give you a quick real-life example. When I went to raise money for FNX the second time, I had two deals. One was a 3x fully participating capital raise of $10 million, and they were giving me a $25 million valuation. You know, great. I bought the company back for a few million. But I ended up with a firm with a 1.5x non-participating capital raise at an $18 million valuation, far smaller valuation, but I chose the second one. And why? It's because I did the math at different levels of seeing, you know, what I would get if the company sold for $40 million. Under deal one, the VCs would have gotten about $33 million. I would have gotten, or the shareholders, there was other shareholders, would have gotten about $17 million. So I would have gotten about 18% of the proceeds. On the deal two, the VCs would have gotten $15 million. I would have gotten about $25 million, or the shareholders, and we would have gotten about 62.5%. Now you go back and look at this deal. You know, the first deal looks better. It's a $25 million valuation. It's that participating preference that really kind of changed everything. And I find a lot of entrepreneurs don't really understand, you know, dividends, participating preferences. So my advice to you, if you're ever raising money from a VC, get them to do this chart for you at different levels and to tell you what you would get, you know, if you sell it in 3 years at, you know, 20, 30, 40, whatever your relevant range is. And it will let you to better analyze the deal. And, you know, you can also hire your own lawyer, but I find, you know, nothing against lawyers in here, but the lawyers are not really finance people, so you really want to look at this in kind of a finance settings, calculate your accrued interest out, et cetera. You know, it's as you can see, vitally important to do. Let's see. So anyway, the key thing there is the best valuation may not be the best deal. You really got to look at the terms. VCs are great, though. They have cash. They can give you really good board expertise. They can give you needed guidance. They will require a lot of documentation. They can interfere operationally if you're not doing well. But on the whole, most of the successful companies in this country, you know, that have gotten large anyway, have been VC-backed. And VCs, if you pick a quality one, you know, bring a lot of value. And again, there's, you know, first-round capital. There's any number of firms here that I think are just great. Just going in there, you know, to manage growth, you've got your company, you're started, things are going quickly. One thing you'll find as you're doing it is that the team that you have when you're $500,000 and everyone's walking around and doing stuff is different than the team you need when you're a larger company. I'll give you a real-life example again. I had a CTO, great CTO. You know, when I first started, we had 4 or 5 developers, and we needed this thing done, and he would just stay up 3 days straight and get this thing done and then disappear for a day, day and a half. Fast forward, the company's bigger. I've got 30, 40 developers that he's managing. You know, he would do the same thing. He would kind of do the project himself, come in, you know, then disappear for a day and a half. That doesn't work when you have 40 people, developers you're managing, and they're all coming to you. So while he was the perfectly right guy for my early stage, he was not the right guy for later stage. So you have to be aware, and things do change. Also watch for plateaus. Companies tend to plateau at 2 million and 10 million in revenue, and that's because you need different processes and different procedures in place. So be careful that, you know, you don't get into that thing, because your investors get pissed, to be honest, and they'll do some changes, so better for you to change it. So people will change, and again, plan and put these processes, business processes, in place as early as you can. Kind of one of my quotes, you know, best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, second best time is now. Once you realize you need a process in, put it in, you know. Maybe you should put it in a year ago because you've had problems, but just go ahead and put it in. Where to go for health? Your main resource is other people that run businesses. That is really your best source. All businesses are the same. I'm in a group called YPO, Young Business Organization, Young Presidents Organization. I'm in a smaller subset of that group. You know, I've got a guy that runs an air freight company that's, you know, $1 billion company, guy that roasts chocolate, another software guy. All businesses are the same. The problems you're running into are exactly the same, so you can go to them and ask for help. But be organized. These people are fairly busy. As it were, and you know, you will be taking up their time, but typically they're glad to help. And I think I'm at my closing. Yeah, in summary, you know, being an entrepreneur is kind of the best, worst job I've ever had. You know, it has aspects of both, and kind of the final thing to kind of paraphrase from Lord of the Rings, you know, certainty of failure, small chance of success. You know, what are we waiting for? So that's kind of my talk. I think I have a few minutes for questions if. Like 4. If someone could confirm that from the organizers. Yep, good. Any questions? I completely educated you in 41 minutes. I love that. So, okay, well, good. Okay, thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed this program from the Founder Factory. For more information, visit phillystartupleaders.org. We produce this program in the studios of Professional Podcasts in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. For everyone at the Philly Startup Leaders and Founder Factory, this is Steve Lubetkin. Thank you for joining us, and take good care.